Today, we will be talking about Mavuika's story. After we have experienced the high of Mizuki's story, I do want to draw a little bit of comparison to the Mavuika story quest and Mavuika's story arc overall in the Archon quest. We're gonna attempt to dive into why it doesn't feel as good. My favorite character right now, the advanced can, is Mavuika, but I think I'm more smitten with the idea, the potential of this character, rather than what she is currently being portrayed in the game. That's also exactly why I think she deserves a better written story quest for her. I am a person who enjoys storytelling in all the different medias a lot. I enjoy watching TV shows with good story. I enjoy playing video games with good story. Genshin is one such video games, but the quality of their story is sometimes very high, but sometimes very mid as well. Other than that, I am a very active Dungeons and Dragons player, so just general tabletop role-playing games, and that also fuels my passion for storytelling as well. I think Mavuika is also a character that has quite a bit of promotional material, some animation dedicated to her that shows off her past in the trailer. But though for Mavuika specifically, I was a little bit disappointed that her past was not explored a lot in her story quest. Alright, done with my daily duty-ish. Whatever is remaining we can do in my evening stream. Dang it, I cannot sit. Come on, game. Alright, let's talk about Mavuika. I want to start this by saying that I want to try to dive deep into the storytelling aspect of the game and why I think Mavuika's story did not work very well, even though I was hoping a lot more for this character. During this discussion, please try to bring up any points that you think would be relevant, but also bring them up in a respectful manner. If I notice people saying things just to stir things up and potentially start an argument, then that would be either a timeout or repeated offense will result into a ban. But all of that is just to create a safe environment for us to all express our opinion regarding the storytelling aspect of the game. Let's start this discussion off with a video from a different person that I find talking about this problem really well. Yeah. I think I have watched this before, but I do want to watch it again. This is a video from Sorosness. The title is What's Wrong with Mavuika? Genshin Character Review. How not to write a character.
So what's wrong with Mavuika? Absolutely nothing. And that, for me, is the problem. From what I've seen online, the reaction to her release has been mostly positive, with a few small sect community feeling different. And a lot of the discussion in those spaces in particular seem to be people just not understanding where others are coming from. I don't begrudge anyone who does like her, but I, unfortunately, do not. Normally, when a character is not for me, I end up just skipping them and that's that. A few times someone has asked me whether I ever have anything negative to say about characters, and while the answer is yes, I generally only review characters I have, and since I only pull for ones I like, I end up never creating content about characters that I don't like. In Mavuika's case, many people seem confused why anyone would dislike her in the first place, and several have asked me why I'm skipping her. Since I don't see much content which chimes with my perspective, for once it feels worthwhile for me to share my thoughts even though I don't have her in-game. As I prepare myself for the pitchforks, I just like to preface this by saying that you can like or even love Mavuika and I won't think any less of you. I'm not trying to change your mind in the slightest. Everything about this is inherently subjective. If you're interested in hearing an alternate perspective, then you're in the right place. If you're going to get upset if someone says anything remotely negative about your favorite flamehead waifu, then you might not be. Note that since this discussion focuses on her character more than anything else, this will contain full spoilers up to and including Act 5 of the Natlan Archon quest and Mavuika's story quest. Naturally,
Alright, so this beginning part of the video, this content creator talks first about the gameplay, the impression of the characters, and whether the aesthetic of the characters really fitting with the world or not. Now, while all of these are thoughtful discussion, I do want to highlight more regarding the story part of her. I will share this video link in the chat after we finish watching this together, so people can watch the part about her playstyle, her appearance, the discussion in the first half of the video. In general, I can provide a summary. Her playstyle is not exactly jiving with a lot of people, and I understand why. It is because we already have so many pyro main DPS. People are kind of expecting Mavuika to be more of an off-field character, that is either replacing Xiangling or replacing Bennett. In the end, Mavuika kind of replaced Xiangling in some team, but it is not to the capacity that a lot of people like. So if you look here, look, these are the list of 5-star Tyro character. We have a main DPS, a wannabe main DPS, the strongest main DPS of the past, the main DPS that remains strong until today, the main DPS that people pull for and then complain about, the main DPS that has incredibly janky gameplay, charge attack gameplay. Alright, let's skip Mavuika for now because that's before she's coming out, and a main DPS that has fallen off. Wow, the absolute state of Tyro characters in Genshin. People kind of have expecting Mavuika to be an off-field character for a change. And also, there are some comments regarding the bike as well, and I do recognize that regarding the world building, it's a little bit out of place. Simply not because it is technological advanced. Fontaine also has a lot of technological stuff, and throughout Tevat there are also a lot of technological remnant. But what is a little bit jarring is why not more people in Natlan using similar kind of technology, bike or any kind of vehicle to run around the NPC. All of that is a summary of the first half of the video. Let's look at the story part, characterization right here.
So now onto the main course, her character. I've been thinking about her from two perspectives: the type of character they were probably aiming for, and the type of character they ended up creating. I've seen a lot of people complain about Mavuika's lack of character arc, and while I do agree that stories about characters who go through some change tend to be compelling, stories about static characters can be just good when done right. Some of the most iconic characters of all time do not change much throughout their story. Sherlock Holmes, Indiana Jones, or even Maximus Meridius. In these stories, the protagonist remains more or less static, so many might expect them to be dull and boring, but the key is that something else makes them compelling. In classic Sherlock stories, the mystery keeps us entertained, and his deft solutions are the payoff to all the setup. Indie films are all about him discovering what the bad guys are up to and figuring out some way to stop them despite being just a little on the rougher side of competence. Gladiator shows Maximus holding on to his moral integrity and his belief that Rome should be the light shining in the darkness despite facing the worst of a corrupt world which constantly tries to beat him down. Hoyo clearly wanted Mavuika to be iconic and unchanging, even in Act 5, and they thought that an action-packed war against our age-old enemy would be sufficient to keep us entertained. For many, it worked, particularly for those who love shonen tropes and don't mind it when a story only shows the final act, but for the rest of us, it fell short.
Now, I do want to add that all of the animation quality and the representation of all the fight scenes in the game, the animation quality, all of that, it is top-notch in the game so far. Any other Archon quest in the past is not coming close to this level of dedication to animation, to fight choreography, and that is something to applaud. Regardless, the story, let's continue.
At least in part due to what felt like poor pacing and lack of tension. When people try to figure out what went wrong in that final act, Mavuika's lack of growth stands out and ends up getting much of the blame. But if Hoyo had done the rest of the story well, few would have been so disappointed. The other major complaint about Mavuika's character is that she lacks any flaws. The dreaded accusation Mary Sue is often thrown around. Unfortunately, Mary Sue is one of the most loaded terms anyone can use when talking about character. It comes from a Star Trek parody fanfic, and even in the initial source, there are several valid interpretations of what the character was intended to critique. From then on, it's just grown further, and as a result, people take this term to mean completely different things. Fandoms often interpret it to mean an audience surrogate or self-insert character in a wish-fulfillment story. Meanwhile, in writing circles, it's more likely to mean a character who lacks flaws, is inexplicably competent, or is automatically adored by anyone who isn't an outright villain. Two different takes on that are particularly relevant to Mavuika: the infallible character and the idealized character. An infallible character is one who never fails. Anything they try goes precisely to plan, and they never make mistakes. Sometimes this can be masked by showing the character fail at things which are irrelevant to the main course. For example, struggling to learn something, while they remain flawlessly competent when tackling their true goals. Mavuika is a quintessential example of this. She's hyper competent at everything she tries. Just look at her first character story, which explicitly states that in some cases, Mavuika surpasses masters with decades of experience after studying a skill just for a single year. I read through her lore in the wiki to get a better feel for her as a character, since that's often where Hoyo likes to stash the real depth they don't quite manage to pull off in the quest, but honestly, it was bafflingly over the top, to the point that I started feeling like I was reading ChatGPT's attempt at inventing a backstory for an epic, infallible leader. This plays out in the Archon quest and her story quest, where every decision she makes pays off flawlessly. As mentioned earlier, the common excuse I've seen people make for this is that of course everything goes well because she's been planning this for 500 years, but was she really conscious and actively planning for that entire time? And since when does even the best laid plan work out flawlessly? Regardless of whether it's justified in the lore, a character who is completely infallible sucks tension out of the story, because as soon as it becomes clear that they are completely unable to fail, then the rest of the narrative becomes just a bland victory lap. Genshin already struggles to maintain tension even when the characters do make mistakes, since it's pretty clear that things will work out in the end. A truly infallible character like Mavuika makes that even worse. An idealized character is one who either has no flaws flaws or whose flaws are positive traits in disguise. Similar to the age-old answer in job interviews, my only flaw is that I'm a workaholic. From what I've seen, people consider Mavuika's main flaws to be that she's stubborn, reckless, and cares too much. All three of these could have been viable flaws which would have made for some interesting tension in the story, but due to her infallibility, they never caused any issues whatsoever, and for me and many others, they don't feel like an integral part of her personality. We're told these flaws exist, but never shown them. Mavuika's stubborn streak could have reared its head if not for the fact that literally everyone else always agrees with her. Only Capitano spent any significant time arguing against her, and even he gave up with barely a shrug. A character being reckless kinda requires them to not have everything go perfectly for them at all times, in the same way that courage without—
Real quick on the Capitano arguing with Mavuika, I also share the same sentiment. He goes here, he fought, he lose. Fuck. I guess I'm not gonna argue anymore. I think that's a part that is lacking in terms of story writing. They could have been written a little bit better. And the part where he actually argues verbally with Mavuika is when we found Archon, and then there was an argument between Capitano and Mavuika and how to best do all of this, how to best, whether we use the gnosis. I don't remember everything entirely correctly, but I remember that discussion between Mavuika and Capitano being cut short simply after Capitano asked the Traveler, what do you think? And then Traveler gives a very generic answer that we choose, an answer that is not even a choice, but the two choices are just continuation of one sentence even. And then he's like, fuck it, I agree. What?
Without fear is merely confidence, recklessness without risk of failure is pure competence. And caring too much, of course, sits squarely within the I'm totally a workaholic category of so-called flaws. But if done right, it could have legitimately added tension and raised stakes. For one thing, maybe she could have felt conflicted when sending her friends off to potential death, since they're at risk even with the protection of the Odor Resurrection. Instead, nothing. Or imagine if, when—
Yeah, alright, I'm gonna preface this real quick. The meeting between Mavuika and the visage of her sister in the last act, it leaves so much to be desired. This content creator is gonna go a little bit more in-depth and some potential scenario where it's gonna be much better in terms of story writing. And some of these examples actually gives me chill. So yeah, listen.
When her sister's soul appears before her, Mavuika breaks down. Here is the soul of a person she cares so much about that she could have struggled to even bear the thought of leaving her behind once more. This would have been the time for the power of friendship to lift her up in a truly authentic and moving moment, as support from her friends could have helped her steel herself and take that next step towards the final battle. Instead, all we got was an oddly cheerful chat, and then Mavuika continues on, ever the stoic hero. Or imagine if Gasoithos, after the initial dragon phase of the battle, had transformed to take the forms of Mavuika's friends, and she had struggled to continue the fight. She could have soldiered on in increasing distress, only for it to take the form of her sister at the end, leading to her needing our help to overcome the enemy. An enemy taking this strength and turning it into a weakness could have been an interesting twist, and would have made Mavuika more sympathetic for many people without changing her essence. Instead, even though she supposedly sacrifices everything meaningful to her, she shows barely any emotion when confronted with what she's lost. So to me, it just seemed like she didn't really care.
Holy shit, that would have been so hype. Did you hear what described in here? What was described in here? Hold on, let me play that again. Imagine.
Cheerful chat, and then Mavuika continues on, ever the stoic hero. Or imagine if Gasoithos, after the initial dragon phase of the battle, had transformed to take the forms of Mavuika's friends, and she had struggled to continue the fight. She could have soldiered on in increasing distress, only for it to take the form of her sister at the end, leading to her needing our help to overcome the enemy. An enemy taking this strength and turning it into a weakness could have been an interesting twist, and would have made Mavuika more sympathetic for many people without changing her essence.
Yeah, so hearing this version, it really dawns on me how lackluster the story is and how powerful it could have been. Holy shit, like with such a simple change, the enemy is the final boss, probably doesn't have to become like the part of the weekly boss cutscene or anything, but just in the final act, the final boss, the dragon, takes the form of her friends in the fight just to mess with Mavuika, and then finally taking the form of her sister, making Mavuika break down, not able to soldier on. Like instead, what we have in the fight, what we have is that the Traveler falls down, and then Mavuika decides to like just put a hand on his shoulder and here, let's take a big ass sword or claymore out of the fire. Where is that? Like right here. Look at the animation. All right, let's stand up. Cool. Yeah, move on. Now let's grab a big ass a claymore out of the fire. What is the significance of all this? What is the significance of all this? Like, imagine if this is the traveler going into this when Mavuika is down and trying to reflect on all of her past, all of her sacrifice up until now, and then the traveler puts a hand on Mavuika's shoulder to give her the power of friendship or whatever. It doesn't matter. The role reversed. It's gonna make Mavuika a lot more of a sympathetic hero. Like, in the end, she is like, her human side is showing. It just leaves so much to be desired. Let's continue on with the video a little bit here. I think the content creator here makes a few more good points regarding this.
Really care. Another slight twist on that flaw, which I've seen mentioned, is that she believes in others too much, and it can be hard to live up to her expectation. This is another flaw which never backfires, as Mavuika's belief and pep talks invariably ensure that the people she believes in always prove her right. Even her hypercompetence could have been shown as a double-edged sword. We could have been shown that her compulsion to be the best stems from a deep-rooted insecurity, for example, or that it separates her from her subjects when all she wants is a deeper and more personal connection. There are so many subtle tweaks that could have turned her into a more nuanced character without changing her core essence, but they were all ignored. And inevitably, people bring up the other Archons and how several of them are somewhat static characters. For me, they work better in their respective stories, but it's also pretty clear that they all have their flaws. Venti cares, but wallows in his trauma and drinks himself insensate just to dull the pain. Zhongli is calculated and reserved, but while he does have a sentimental side, he struggles to understand the lives of his subjects or empathize with their problem. Raiden is a ruthless tyrant, but we see her soft side via Yamiko's perspective. We see her grief and vulnerability, understand her arrogance, and then see her change for the better. Nahida has the wisdom of innocence, but is crippled by self-doubt and slowly comes to trust herself over the course of her story. Furina is an interesting one to compare Mavuika to, because the cores of their stories have many similarities, but where Mavuika knows the plan, Furina is largely in the dark and has no clue when her torture will end. And more importantly, we discover Furina's plight over the course of the quest, while Mavuika's is stated openly right from the start. In contrast to the other Archons, Mavuika never shows us a different side to herself. She's just a fearless leader through and through. Many people wanted to see an Archon who really lives up the name, but even the most charismatic leader imaginable would be more compelling if they show some other facets themselves. In a world where even the gods are flawed, Mavuika feels out of place to me. It could be argued that Hoyo were aiming for this to express the idea that a human Archon is better, since she can understand her subjects on a more fundamental level, but that intent does not explain her being so idealized. Even if she had a bunch of flaws but showed she was trying, she would already have been streets ahead of certain other Archons. Genshin does have other characters who are very static. It is, to some extent, a basic requirement for Hoyo to be able to market any given character properly, but it's more prominent in Mavuika's case than in others. For me, her story quest made zero difference on any of these points. I still can't quite get over how her fight against Shibalanke was declared a victory for Mavuika when they were clearly evenly matched, and then she goes out and boasts about it. Idealized or infallible characters can get a pass if the story is a power fantasy where people are expected to self-insert into that character to a large degree, which makes the experience cathartic and empowering. If Mavuika filled that role for you, then I totally understand why you loved every minute she was on the screen. Unfortunately, I just do not feel the same. Of course, there's always the chance that Hoyo could swoop in with a new chapter in this story, which completely turns all of her characterization upside down. There are hints that the true finale of Natlan's story is still to come. The name in the Pyro Gemstone's description is still obscured, the Gnosis is still in Mavuika's hands, and the Fatui will surely have some reaction to the effective death of the first of the Harbingers. So perhaps we are in the calm before the storm. Unfortunately, I just do not get the impression that this is the case. I feel like Hoyo bent all of their resources into making Mavuika overwhelmingly awesome, and neglected to showcase the depth which they intended to give her. Even the stories within her profile pages are astonishingly devoid of depth. Overall, I'm a little sad to skip an Archon, but since I don't like her design, don't like her playstyle, and don't really feel anything for her as a character, she was absolutely not for me. If you like her, then all power to you. I hope you get much joy out. Until next time.
I share the same sentiment regarding I hope that Hoyoverse is cooking something else for Mavuika. I hope that they are gonna release a second story quest for Mavuika, maybe in 5.6, maybe in 5.7, something that has to do with, because the Gnosis is still in her hand, and the Fatui or the Sarissa will still gonna do something about it. So I hope that there is more to her story that is to come, and it could expand on the depth of the characters. That is what I hope. But we'll see. We'll see whether Hoyoverse can deliver on that or not. Now, there is something I do want to mention. An outlet that can lead to a better story. I think this content creator kind of touched on this a little bit, but I think I could try to portray a version of it.
Another slight twist on that flaw, which I've seen mentioned, is that she believes in others too much, and it can be hard to live up to her expectation. This is another flaw which never backfires, as Mavuika's belief and pep talks invariably ensure that the people she believes in always prove her right.
She believes in people, and people always lives up to her expectation. So we don't see any hardship that Mavuika has to endure at all. Now imagine this. Imagine, what if during the war, what if during the process of gathering all the 6 heroes of Natlan, Chasca doesn't come through? This gonna fix both Chasca's story and Mavuika's story in one fell swoop. What if Chasca is overcome by grief of her sister dying, and she does not live up to the ancient name or whatever the mechanic behind that is, and she is not awakened as one of the Natlan heroes? The plan falls apart. This, for one, will give more depth to Chasca as a character, because as of right now in the story, when her sister died, Chasca screams angrily and then she calms down. Like, what the hell was that? Let Chasca grief play out in full. Let her not meet up to the expectation of her ancient name, and there could be more that is coming in the upcoming act to resolve that, or dedicate a little bit more screen time to Chasca. And then during that time, Mavuika's plan is falling apart. There is not enough time for all the 6 heroes to come together. Capitano doubts her. There is a bigger argument between Capitano and Mavuika. Can we afford to wait more? People are dying. The Fatui subordinate of Capitano are dying. Natlan people are dying. That would make for such an amazing scene. And then Mavuika will likely have to say to the traveler in secret that, hey, Chasca is the last person. Can you go and help Chasca through the situation or something? And then Chasca is on a rampage or something, trying to kill the Abyss non-stop, not having a care for herself and for the people around her. That could be an entirely different act in the Archon quest. That could be the Interlude instead of all the Choma dealing stuff, which it could be cool, but it seems a little bit lackluster. Do you even remember the Interlude where we go to Flower Feather Clan and there are some people that are suffering from Choma from the war? I mean, it's fine, but it could be so much better if we are helping Chasca dealing with her situation, with Chasca dealing with her trauma of losing his sister. Her Chasca story quest could also be so much better. But alas, we can only sit here and discuss about what could have been. We can only sit here and discuss about our headcanon and what could be better for the story. For Chasca's story, for Mavuika's story, like any version, the version that Sorosness talked about where the enemy is taking the form of her friends, Mavuika's friend, and then finally taking the form of her sister to mess with her and making her remember all the sacrifice she had to make to get here. That could be one way to do it. What I mentioned is also could be another way of doing it. So as a player, I still love the character Mavuika, but what I think is I love the idealized version of her. I love the potential that this character can be rather than the story that has been written for her as of right now. It is somewhat unfortunate that it is the case, but as of right now, there is just not a lot of depth to this character. She could be described as a Mary Sue, a character that is always succeeding, have everything's going according to plan for her, barely being challenged at all, and it creates little stake for the story, little drama. I wonder what your opinion on that discussion is. Do you share a similar sentiment toward how Hoyoverse is handling the writing of Mavuika and of Natlan story quest or Natlan Archon quest in general? A little change into Mavuika's story regarding the Archon quest, is that something that you think would be making the quest better, or would you have a different expectation for the quest and you say that a triumphant victory like Hoyoverse portray is something that you would prefer? Let's leave the room a little bit for the discussion. I'll reach out in a bit. In a little bit, we can also watch a different video. This one I have not watched yet. Bro, after Fontaine, Genshin has just been making mid content. I do not share the same sentiment out. The reason I'm bringing back Mavuika's story is because Mizuki's story is so good. It reminds me of what Genshin is capable of. Mizuki's story is so good. It is not world-shattering good, but it is a story that I would love to experience again. I can recommend it to other people who has not experienced it. It does not feel like something that is just a quest because it's supposed to be a quest to introduce a new character. It seems like a complete story that is engaging from the beginning to the end. the Mizuki story quest for me. There is no point in the game where it feels like we have to go here and then go here and then go here because it is a quest, so we have to run some errands. Everything contributes to the story. There is a proper climax to the story. The story also shows the flaw and the value of the characters being on screen. There are moments in the Mizuki story quest where I think it could be improved, but compared to the Mavuika story quest and the Archon quest as a whole, or the last act of the Archon quest, I think it's a step above. Yeah, that one part where we can shake our head is good. That is a part that I think a lot of people meme about, and I think that is something above and beyond regarding the animation, but that is not the thing that I'm mentioning about. What I'm mentioning is how the storytelling and the pacing of the quest is also living up to the expectation. I like more because of her huge guy personality. Yeah, I like both actually. I like both her guy and her personality, sincerely. If she's not a standard character that we can guarantee ourselves to get at some point in the future, and there's also the selector that's gonna come in 6.0, I will be pulling for her. Regardless, I would much prefer comments to talk about, to contribute to the discussion meaningfully about the Mavuika quest as well as the Archon quest, rather than more empty comments like, it's not good. Hello Daniel, you have just missed a big portion of the discussion regarding Mavuika quest and the Archon quest as a whole. I think you usually enjoy these kind of talks, Daniel. I mean, H-Blanket came and all, but Mavuika just feels like that typical hero from a 1990s anime. I think the whole thing about Shiblanke coming, it's not adding anything to the story at all. It is a hangout regarding a character that we barely know about from before, and the hangout does not add anything significant to the lore that we cannot just get from like another character telling us or reading from somewhere. It does not add anything significant to Mavuika's personality. Like, what is her story quest supposed to say more about her? Okay, the war is over, so she's a little bit more carefree, sure. The part about her past, it's barely touched upon. I think the part where Shiblanke asked Mavuika, hey, do you want to talk to your family again? I had hoped that, oh, this may be one part of the quest where they finally touch a little bit more meaningfully on Mavuika's past, but then she just brushed it off. She says, no, I'm over my past. Okay, while that is a valid response, it is a boring response in terms of story writing. It is a response that kind of just brush part her, the meaty part of the story. And I think I've mentioned it a few times at this point, but the love I have for this character is more so about the potential that she can be, the potentially good story that could be told about her rather than what is currently being told right now. Still currently holding on that hope that there will be a second story quest to her that gives a lot more depth into her characters, but that is, I do recognize that is somewhat wishful thinking. Okay, let's take a look at another video. This one is on the Natlan Archon quest. I have not watched this one yet, and this will be my first watch with you.
And I have to admit, Natlan's Archon quests are over, and I have to admit that I'm disappointed. This whole region has been a roller coaster for me. Even before 5.0 dropped, I had gone from excited.
Real quick, I do want to express what I think of the Archon quest briefly before we watch this video. I think all the things that has been building up until close to the end of Act 4. So when it first arrived, we meet Kachina, everything that has been with the world building about Natlan, the competition to choose who goes to fight, and then I think in Act 2 we have to go save Kachina. In Act 3 there's a little bit more world building regarding Ororon and how he's following Capitano, and then Act 4 the all-out war. Up until that part, I really like about the Archon quest. I love the animation quality, I love the new poses that they're adding for the characters, the new cinematic camera angles that they're adding to everything. The world building up to that point is perfect, but from the Chasca moment, everything is kind of going downhill for me. And Act 5 is to be desired. We have already talked, I'm gonna touch briefly on it again. We already touched about how if Chasca loses her shit right there when her sister dies and she's not living up to her ancient name, the 6th hero of Natlan is not coming, the plan's falling apart, Capitano and Mavuika comes into a heated discussion once again on what to do with the noses. All of that would lead to a much more interesting story, and the traveler, us, the player, has to go and resolve every situation, and it shows that Mavuika is not infallible. Her plan could fail. Everything will add more to both the character of Chasca and to the character of Mavuika, how Mavuika is dealing with everything under stress and all that stuff. Regardless, we have what we had. The Act 5. Act 5 still has amazing animation quality, but the story, the pacing is not on par and not what I expected it to be anymore. Let's look at this video and see whether this content creator shares somewhat of a similar sentiment, or does this content creator bring up good points as well. This video does have a healthy amount of views, 100,000 views something. So apparently some people share the sentiment with this content creator. We'll see.
By our first glimpse of the Saurians, to underwhelmed by the character reveal trailer, then to even more excited after the livestream blew me away. And while I have my complaints about some aspects of the story leading up to the finale, especially the interlude quest, for me, the first 4 acts as a whole did a pretty good job at delivering on the promise of the new region. The world quests were fantastic, and I loved the ambient quests. I was so excited for the finale. It felt like it was poised to be one of the best Archon quests so far. Instead, Act 5
wow.
felt even more frustrating.
Exactly the same, huh?
How did it all go so
I did not
wrong?
watch this video.
Before we get into this, it's worth noting that perspectives on stories are always varied. My favorite parts of the story will be some other people's least favorites, and things I couldn't stand will be the aspects which made others love it. That's a good thing, and I love hearing different perspectives. As long as it doesn't devolve into a flame war, a good discussion about what led to people's divergent feelings can be fascinating. So please bear that in mind when you get to the parts where you inevitably disagree with me. I'm not saying your perspective is wrong, so don't at me. And of course, this video will contain spoilers for each act of the Archon quest as part of each section, though I'm going to keep it very high level. Natlan.
The way they handled Raiden's story even up until the recent event has been arguably poetic. But for some reason, they aren't doing that for Mavuika. I think, well, I am not doing the event quest for this yet, but I am aware that Raiden's character development has been continued even after Inazuma Archon quest ends. Even that's like the continuation of her character development has been a little bit far in between, but there is character development on Raiden's part. She's been growing a little bit more passionate. She's been growing a little bit more in tune with the people of Inazuma. She understands them more. She tries her best to be a little bit more social and go to events and all that stuff. I like how they are handling it. So there are no doubts more character development there. The same with Hu Tao's and the most recent Li Yue, what was it called? Lantern Ride quest. Hu Tao's story quest has been kind of lackluster. It's not really showing much about the depth of her characters, just more so that she's a quirky character. And I think the Lantern Ride quest has been really showing us a different side of Hu Tao. The side that is not always certain of herself, but she's trying to move forward. She has a sense of responsibility, is ready to sacrifice herself and all that good stuff. I think the events are an outlet for the developer, Hoyoverse, to develop a character more. But it's unfortunate that it has to come to the event for us to learn more about character. Why can't a character be well written in their story alone and have the events just be more aspects, more colorful aspects of those characters? And the events are something that can be missed for the people that is not staying around for the event specifically. That's what troubles me, I think. So real quick, going in line with the disclaimer that I should be respectful and say sorrowsness, this content creator is just saying in here in this video, disagreement is welcome, but not heated discussion, not just saying things like something is shit or something is the developer is doing that or doing something. Flaming is discouraged in the discussion. Okay, trying to bring up more constructive criticism for the quest. That is the spirit of the discussion today. So hopefully we can do that to have a more constructive discussion. Unfortunately, the only way they could make story continual and permanent is through second or third story quests. I do recognize that, and I actually do hope that they pump them out more often. Like, what would prevent Hoyoverse from transforming or just simply turning the Lantern Ride quest of 2025 into a so-called Hu Tao second story quest and have that be permanent? It just happened to happen in the Chinese New Year or the Lunar New Year, the Lantern Ride, whatever it is. But it can be the second Hu Tao second story quest, and it's now permanent in the game. It's just a few lines of code, right, to make that available for people that's coming after Lantern Ride. And it's just a naming convention.
Natlan's trailers left me feeling unconvinced, but the livestream completely changed my mind, and by the time 5.0 came around, I was so ready to dive in, and I was not disappointed. Acts 1 and 2 were centered around the annual pilgrimage, which the warriors of Natlan take part in. The pilgrimage is a tournament, and the winners gain the honor of traveling to the different dimension called Night Kingdom to fight back the Abyss in defense of their nation.
This is very good world building.
Story pretty entertaining overall, very much helped by the fact that I liked Kachina a lot, since the whole story focused on her. She has a satisfying character arc. She starts off racked with self-doubt, unsure why she has been chosen to bear an ancient name, and abandoned by her teammates. Molani steps in to help her out, and eventually Kachina...
Actually, real talk. Mavuika has better story. Kachina has better story than Mavuika. And Chasca, real talk. She has character development and an actually entertaining story embedded in the Archon quest. The other characters...
wins her
Kachina's a 4-star, by the way.
Plays in the pilgrimage via grit and determination. Tournament arc was a fun experience. The pacing was pretty great for the most part, the cutscenes were amazing, and when Kachina ends up stranded in the Night Kingdom, surrounded by enemies with no way to escape, I was fully on board with the mission to rescue her. My only real complaints at this point were that, as usual, the denouement was far too long, much of the world building didn't really hold up to scrutiny, though it was interesting enough that I kinda gave it a pass. And it was also a little odd that Capitano just gave up on getting the Gnosis after a single fight. One detail which stuck out to me was that it felt refreshing that Mavuika was more approachable right from the start and openly shared her plans with the Traveler and Paimon. At this point, it makes a lot of sense for their reputation to precede them and open doors like this, and it felt like a nice subtle way to show that they're now seen as an important figure in the world. 3 started off with the Traveler.
Hello, what's up, teammate? Long time no see. Hello. Good to see you again. You're gonna need to remind me a little bit on how long that was. Sosuke Aizen
and Shilonen working together, trying to forge an ancient name so that the Traveler can be revived by the Ode of Resurrection if they die in the Night Kingdom, making it safe for them to join Mavuika on her quest to destroy the Abyss once and for all. They rope in the help of Citlali, who sends them off on a further side quest to clear Auroron's name, and even though I liked Auroron and always have time for Capitano, going on a side quest to a side quest to a side quest just didn't hit the spot for me. After all that, there was another side quest, this time...
Holy crap, this part is almost erased from my memory. Holy crap, and now I remember it. This part adds nothing to the story. Well, okay, it could have been, the whole part about Fuchui helping people could be done and told and done by 2 sentences. This is just basically building up our liking for Koichi, and then so they can kill her off. This could be done so much better if it shows more of Chasca characteristic and shows that she is reckless, she is not caring about whether Fuchui having good intention or not. It could be handled so much better, and that she's just going to attack them and then later find out that Fuchui actually have a good intention or something like that. It shows more of her recklessness, which at this point of the story has only been told and never seen.
Involving Chasca and Koichi, and my main memory of that section was an intrusive thought.
I'm Elon Musk, guy. It's been 2 months, I see, so you changed your name. It's a little bit tough to learn people name and then they change again. But hey, welcome back.
Thought that Koichi was definitely going to die at some point before we leave Natlan. While this act felt bland in comparison to Act 1 and 2, and I didn't really find any of it particularly engaging, I couldn't help but keep comparing it to Fontaine's Act 3, which was such a pain to grind through that Natlan's filler act felt perfectly adequate in comparison. Act 4 began with a side quest, which I legitimately remembered as the climax of Act 3 instead, until I went back and fact-checked this video. We infiltrate a cave system, and after some shenanigans involving Auroron being possessed by a vengeful spirit, we prevent Capitano from carrying out his own plan to save Natlan from the Abyss. He wanted to destroy and reconstruct the ley lines, which would have solved the Abyss problem for now, at the cost of wiping the memory and personality of every person in all of Natlan. This felt like the seeds of a really interesting story to me. Capitano and Mavuika have the same goal, but they disagree on how to achieve that goal. Capitano's plan is reliable, but has a steep cost, while Mavuika's is risky and uncertain, but would not involve such sacrifice. Exactly the kind of core conflict which can make for a compelling story. He seems to take it with a shrug, however, and is oddly friendly with the other characters once his original plan is thwarted. And then the Abyss invades Natlan. The remainder of Act 4 was brilliant. I loved so much about it. They really tried to make this feel different, impactful, and for once, our actions
yeah, this is good. This was really good.
The whole war sequence felt so exciting. I felt genuine pressure to make quick decisions and rush towards objectives in the hopes of saving people. For once, I was the one pushing forwards, rather than some characters saying, "We need to rush," while they all just stand around and talk. I particularly liked how with every choice you made, you saved some people and you lost some others. For me, this emphasized that in war, nobody wins, and no matter what you do, people suffer. It's interesting looking back at it. Objectively, there's little difference in how the gameplay worked compared to previous stories. Each section was a simple fight and then some chatting to NPCs afterwards, but something about the way it was framed just made it work so well for me. I know some people who just did not get into it at all, but for once, I found myself gripped even by the conversations with random NPCs and felt emotional about their plight. Even more impactful was the horrible moment when I thought Toto had died, which almost brought me to tears, only to find out that she was injured but would be okay, which really did make me cry from pure relief. I can understand why this whole act would fall flat for people who didn't really get into it, but for me, it was brilliant. The cutscenes especially were absolutely epic and felt like a true climax. Unlike certain other cutscenes from earlier in the game, it felt like a real battle instead of a handful of people play acting. Koichi's death felt impactful, despite me seeing it coming a mile away, and that scene of the aftermath with the list of names of people who died was touching.
I don't think so. I've talked about that a lot. Koichi death doesn't seem impactful, but that is something that I can agree to disagree with this content creator.
Even though they were NPCs you knew nothing about, it felt like it had meaning. The only thing which spoiled that feeling a little was the fact that all of Natlan was back to normal straight away. Given that there would be an interlude quest before the finale, I would have hoped for some lasting effects which we could maybe clean up before the final act, but sadly, this was not to be. Overall, to me, Act 4 felt like the climax of the story. If that had been the end of the Natlan arc, then for the most part, I'd have been very happy. Several key plot threads are left dangling, but they could have been tied up without an extra act, and this would have been an incredible climax. Next, the interlude.
Real quick, I do want to touch on something, is this part right here. The disagreement between Mavuika and Capitano right here. Even though it's a little bit lackluster, I feel that it could be revisited to make it more powerful, rather than just a one-off thing and Capitano's like, oh, okay, cool, we agree now, so we helping each other, and never to be brought up again. But during the moment of the war, if things are getting dire and even more desperate, Capitano could go and confront Mavuika again. Now do you want to use the noses? People are dying, Chasca is not pulling through. Holy fuck, that would have been so epic. No, we don't have that. We have a very Disney-esque story. I guess that is to be expected somewhat in Genshin. Chasca pulled through, and yeah, there's not even any discussion. There was never a doubt. Alright, real quick, let's get back to where the video left.
Next, the interlude. Thankfully, this was pretty short, because while I love the intent, the execution was awful. This part of the story aims to show the aftermath of the war, as Eon-san and the Traveler tried to help several people struggling with something akin to horrifically acute PTSD, but this representation of mental illness and healing is so bad that I struggle to express how far from reality it is. If we could solve mental illness in 5 minutes by constructing one specific scenario which snaps the victim out of it, then the world would be a much more wonderful place, but sadly, that is just not it. While I thought this quest was absolutely awful, the patch brought Natlan with its fantastic world quest which sucked me in and felt very engaging.
Imagine this quest is us fixing Chasca instead of fixing random NPC. Wow!
So despite my disappointment in the interlude itself, I ended up still anticipating what the final act of the Archon quest would bring. And then came the finale. Act 5 kicked.
Yeah, now that I'm thinking about it, I cannot help but, holy crap, I cannot help but imagine how much better the story would be if the Chasca was just not pulling through, and then during the interlude is part where we have to, like, it's kind of just, we can even just skip just Chasca story quest. We can put Chasca story into the interlude part of the story right there. We can go and talk to both of her human parents and both of her Kukusor, Saurian parents, and to find a way to bring Chasca out of the despair of losing her sister. And then, like, Act 4 could be, the abyss is, like, it could be, Act 4 could be not a victory. The ending could be not a victory and leave things hanging for Act 5. It could be, I'm not entirely sure how they would handle the losing part, but let's just, I can imagine one scenario where the Abyss force, when after devastating Natlan, is still hovering above the sky. The 6th hero of Natlan has not been found yet because Chasca is still wallowing in despair. And there's still that thing that is floating in the sky over all Natlan during the interlude quest, and during the brief period of time between Act 4 and Act 5, all over Natlan there are areas that is covered by fog, the purple fog, and it's very hard to navigate. That would have been so cool. And then Act 5, finally Chasca pulled through, we help her during the interlude, and then there could be an opening where Mavuika does all the cool shit, like here, right here.
But for me, like certain other...
But because Natlan has been suffering for a a period of time of the mist being in place and people are suffering. So this is not enough yet. And then we have to go down to the Night Kingdom or whatever to finally kill the dragon and resolve everything. How cool would that be? Holy fuck! The interlude felt like an event quest instead of an arc. It's not even an event quest. Event quest could be good. But yeah, I understand what you mean. It's more like a minor, inconsequential event quest, yes. So the problem is they both lost and won in the same act. I don't think that may be simplifying the problem a little bit. I think the pacing of the story is the problem. The triumphant moment seems too predictable and easily achievable. It's like Mavuika says it is possible, so it is possible. She is infallible. She has the plan for everything, and never have we seen her plan fails. There is no stake. If Act 4, the ending of Act 4, I know Act 4, the war part of us choosing, is already very engaging. But imagine, even after all that, Natlan still loses. And we have a huge cliffhanger up until Act 5 to resolve. The story could have been a lot better too. And during all of that, like let's say Capitano no longer works with Mavuika. Let's say during all of that, Mavuika is suffering from doubt. All of everything she has planned is falling apart. Everything that then she can think about, everything that she has sacrificed from her life 500 years ago, it would have been for nothing. And then that would be adding depth to Mavuika as well, not just Chasca. I think I could write a whole ass fan fiction about this. I could write a whole ass fan fiction about this, and it would be cool.
Felt like it had meaning. The only thing which spoiled that feeling a little was the fact that all of Natlan was back to normal straight away, given that there would be an interlude quest.
Yes, please! Holy crap! Why is all Natlan seems normal after the war? Okay, after the war, very cool. Everything looks normal. The sky looks normal. I guess there's some fragment of the moon up in the sky, but that's it. We go around. We want to farm some Saurian. Yeah, all right. Here's some Saurian to kill. We want to farm some whistles for for characters, for Mavuika's weapon, whatever, for Silonen's material. Yeah, here's some random tribe people to kill, and they don't even care. There's nothing in the world that shows that Natlan has just been experiencing the war, other than that shitty interlude quest. Alright,
before the finale.
Let's continue with the video of it.
Effects which we could maybe clean up before the final act, but sadly this was not to be. Overall, to me, Act 4 felt like the climax of, and then this was not to be. Overall, to me, Act 4 felt like the climax of the story. If that had been the end of the Natlan arc, then for the most part, I'd have been very happy.
I see where the sentiment of Act 4 feeling like the climax come from, because we won. Because we won. That's so simple. If we have lost, it would feel like Act 4 is more earned.
And then came the finale. Act 5 kicked off with an ominous dream, which could have been the perfect way to start building up the tension. Instead, the next hour of this quest was pure filler.
Party!
The Traveler and the Natlan cast set up a party together, and then stand around chatting. It was probably supposed to create a sense of community and show that they all have vibrant lives with real friendships, something notably lacking in the earlier Natlan quests, but it just did not work for me when introduced this late on into the story. I usually enjoyed the parts of the story where the characters kick back and relax together, but unfortunately, the timing and sheer length of this section killed it for me. I went in expecting something more like Act 4, with tension from the start building up to an epic climax, but instead, there was just so much empty dialogue. I was not enjoying myself. The next section lasted almost another hour, and again, just did not work for me. After a little walk around Natlan with China, during which we give human medicine to a baby Saurian like that's totally something which would work and is not concerning at all, the Traveler finds Xilonen and Citlali, and they make their way into the wilderness to test whether the Traveler's new ancient name has properly connected to their soul. After Citlali very rudely pushes Paimon aside, the ancient name passed the test, but the process attracts many lost souls, and Citlali and Xilonen do the exact thing I hate so much, which Hoyo had avoided so brilliantly in Act 4. They spend literally 20 minutes wasting time with inane conversations about how this is unexpected, and they need to rush in order to save these souls, but woe is me, they cannot save all of them, only the ones who are more recent. Absolutely anything to stop them from actually doing the thing they're talking about, and it absolutely drove me up the wall. Even the part with the baby Saurian's grandparents fell completely flat for me, with its complete lack of urgency and the ever-present aversion to subtext. This could have been a really touching moment, built on some interesting world building and great character moments, but instead, I was just so frustrated by the—
Regarding that part, I think For me personally, I think that part is okay-ish. It's not feeling like we having a lot of urgency as the world act, but I think it is okay in terms of bringing us back into the tension of, hey, if we're not gonna do anything, Natlan's still fucked. It's okay. It's a salvageable part after the victory, like to bring the tension back into the surface.
I was unfortunately really not enjoying the quest, so all of its flaws just stuck out to me horribly. The kinds of details which I can usually just shrug off and push into the background were a lot harder to ignore. The awkwardly small crowds in the overlarge arena, the painfully slow sections where the traveler strolls past the adoring people, the lack of compelling dialogue. I was glad that this section was at least much shorter. Once we get into the Night Kingdom itself, we have a couple of fights playing as Mavuika before she runs across her long-lost sister. Two of them are
this part
cheerful. Again, there's no sense of urgency from Mavuika, but even weirder was that neither of them seemed all that affected at finally talking to one another after 500 years apart. Maybe there's some explanation for this.
She's good.
It was utterly bizarre to me. We then swap over to the Traveler, who fights some more Abyss enemies, and is this time joined by the spirits of characters from previous quests in the region. I like this callback to some of the memorable NPCs from Natlan, and I'm glad to see them tie the world quest into the main story. Despite that nice touch, and the section which follows, where the heroes of old step forth to see us on our way while the Sealies come to light our path, unfortunately even this felt like it was trying to be dramatic, but just didn't land for me. I can imagine it felt amazing to people who were invested in the story at this point, but people who aren't, it just falls apart. That was followed by probably my favorite section of Act 5. As we get closer to our destination, we in 12 different types of Saurian, weaving our way past obstructions, zipping through a hail of meteors, and then sailing the Spirit Way while being bombarded by the enemy. This was engaging, varied, and felt like an actual action scene with proper tension and challenge. The cinematography here was particularly good, proof that Genshin can get it right when it really matters. The cutscene which followed was beautifully animated and must have been utterly hype for people who were into it, but after feeling like everything so far was such a slog, it just lacked enough spark to get me invested in the end. The battle against Gasoithoth was a little bit awkward too. Just before the fight, the Traveler resonates with Pyro for the first time, but I sure as heck am not going to take a moment to read through a character's kit before continuing. As a result, my attention ended up split three ways during the path of that fight. All at once, I was trying to get the hang of what is effectively a brand new character, figure out the mechanics of a brand new boss fight, and pay attention to the dialogue from several characters which was happening all at the same time. And then, just when I was getting the hang of it, it cut to Mavuika, who walks very slowly up her rainbow roads once again. There are a few things I hate more than sections of a story which could have been fine as a cutscene, but instead you just have to press a button to make your character slowly walk forward. It's bad enough even at the best of time, but in the middle of a climactic battle? Just why? After a leisurely stroll, we get another cutscene, again beautifully animated, but this one was even more of a miss for me. Natlan's flame goes out, and the crowd watching the stadium all come together to sing their support, which brings it back to life again. To me, this felt really disconnected from the action. There was zero question that the Traveler and Mavuika were at risk of failing at this point, so why would the flame go out? Either way, the Traveler hears their voices, and the pair of them draw Mavuika's flaming sword and go back to battle. The next section of the fight had the same issue as the first one, this time trying to figure out how to combine Pyro, Traveler, and Mavuika in battle while understanding more boss mechanics, while trying to keep track of the dialogue at the same time. It just felt a bit disorienting. We then hear the words our friends said about us, and wield the sword of friendship 3 times to smite the dragon from the sky. Two people wielding one sword in a dramatic pose over and over felt rather goofy to me. This was another point where I can see what they were trying to do, and why it must have felt amazing to some people, but it just didn't work for me. The lack of any moment of fear, any time where it felt like we were at risk of failing, and any payoff to all the time spent forging an ancient name so that the Traveler could be resurrected if things went wrong, kept me feeling disconnected from the story even at its climax, and then it was over so quickly. After one final cutscene showing them defeating the dragon, Mavuika's motorbike appears out of nowhere. Note that it has not previously shown up on screen in the quests, and they ride back to Natlan together. Special mention to my other favorite moment of this whole act, Paimon and Traveler getting in a really good hug. The next section was a celebration of the Traveler's victory, which felt like it was never going to end. It makes sense that the—
Alright, real quick, because there is a little bit more to the video. I do want to address my opinion regarding the boss fight and all the sequence leading up to that. I agree with the sentiment that the beginning of this quest feels like a drag, but from the moment of our ancient name being forged and the despair of the situation start to become a little bit more apparent, this part is, I'd say, a salvageable part of the quest, because it does bring up the stake again, even though I think it could be executed a little bit better rather than just a bunch of dialogue like this. This is okay, but this, holy crap, this, after so many promotion material about Mavuika past, I expected a lot more for this conversation. This is like, oh, hello, oh, hi, Mark, goodbye. What the fuck is this? What is this? What is this? This part with all of the different people from the world quest, that is showing up to help us. This is fine. This is hype. For me, it is nice. Fortunately, for me, I can separate the experience from the previous part of the quest to just focusing on the moment and enjoy this part. Up until the boss fight, everything's hype, everything's cool. I sympathize with the feeling of not being able to understand the Traveler's Kit during the combat, but I think the Traveler's Kit is simple enough. Just press skill and press burst whenever available and then attack. It is not really an issue for me at least. And I don't think it I think they could try to make the sequence of gaining constellation for Traveler and make us not have to read as much. They can give a summarized version say use skill, use burst when available, similar to how a trial character works. Use skills, use burst when available, and then normal attack. There we go. That's how you play Traveler in this final cutscene or final boss fight. Regarding this, I share the same sentiment. It could work, but not like this. It could work if Mavuika is the one who is fallen in battle, not the Traveler. If Mavuika is the one fallen in battle and she has to do the whole as anime flashback like this, it's fine. Shorten this sequence a little bit and make her reflect on all the power of friendship and everything, but she still kind of despair. And then this moment is when
after a leisurely stroll, we get at a cutscene again.
It's when the Traveler is going here to put their hand on Mavuika's shoulder. Hey, look, we're here to do a job. Hey, look at all the people that is kind of waiting and then praying over here. Whatever. It would be much more powerful. Like instead, Traveler's down. Okay, sure. Mavuika is here to save the day. Wow. Okay. I guess. I guess. Does she even need us at all? Hello. Hello. Going from the description from this exact creator, Sorosness, from her different video, it would have been so much more powerful. This is not my idea. This is this creator's idea in the different video. It would have been so much more powerful if Mavuika doesn't even meet the sister here, but during the boss fight, the boss tries to mess with Mavuika's mind. The dragon will, the idea is already there. The dragon can imitate the voice of people from the past, the people that would have died. Have the dragon imitates the voice of Mavuika's friend, even have the dragons change into the form of Mavuika's friend to mess with her, to really bring out the grief from her, all that she has to sacrifice, and then finally, as Mavuika tries to soldier on, and finally the boss will turn into Mavuika's sister, Mavuika's family, to really mess with her mind. Then she's fallen, all that shit. She having to do the whole anime flashback like this. Then finally, the Traveler comes to place a hand on Mavuika. It's something power friendship, and it's nothing we can do about the past anymore. The only thing we can do is for the people who is our friends right here, right now, that is currently looking up to us. That's when the flame is going out, and that's when we can reignite the flame again. That would have been much more powerful. I need some water. I need some water. Let me read chat real quick. Also, Silali feels more of a character compared to Mavuika. Yes, Silali's quest is also much better than Mavuika's story quest. To summarize, it was a Samurai Archon quest. Hey, Sadaf, shaking my boots. There's a spider staring at me. You know what? Assert dominance. Stare back at it. Keep your eye contact with all of its 8 eyes. Show your resolve, and then it will eventually have to bite away. Alright, give me a moment, chat. I'm gonna go grab some water real quick. I'm gonna hydrate myself, then we continue this video. Okay, I'm back, chat. It was observation. It was gone. So, I have spider phobia. I stay back, but it's not doing anything. Alright, hold on. A different thing you can do is grab a flip-flop and do the flip-flop 9000. Flip-flop yeeting 9000 technique. Spider, be gone! Sadaf, I hope you can get through that situation. So, alright, we're gonna continue with this video.
Together to sing their support, which brings it back to life again. To me, this felt really disconnected from the action. There was zero question that the Traveler and Mavuika were at risk of failing at this point. So why would the flame go out? Either way, the Traveler hears their voices, and the pair of them draw Mavuika's flaming sword and go back to battle. The next section of the fight had the same issue as the first one. This time trying to
actually, we watched this part. There's the Paimon part. Yeah. Hold on.
By the thing they sometimes do, where they display a sequence of photos showing snapshots of things that happened and then summarize what went on. It was weird that nobody noticed Mavuika's absence though. The selfies and the autographs were a bit much, and the dance part in particular was just incredibly awkward. But this section was at least partially redeemed for me by all the baby Saurians. I really hope that all this made some people feel loved and appreciated, but for many of us who don't really view the Traveler as a self-insert, it sadly just does not work. And before the story can finally be over, Moreover, there's one last thread to tie off. Zitlali finally notices that Mavuika's missing, and they realize that she has gone to talk to the ruler of death to pay the final price for her original deal. She intends to sacrifice herself to restore the Night Kingdom to its original state. They track her down to Natlan, which now has a red sky with the creepy red eyes of Renova watching from above, and they try to persuade her that there has to be another way, that she should not sacrifice herself, and that she deserves a place in the future that she built with her people. As their not-so-brief debate draws to a close, Capitano shows up, and it turns out that he wants to take Mavuika's place, and that this was what he wanted all along. And of course, nobody objects to this at all, so he just dies. The animation for Capitano's final moment is, as always, utterly gorgeous, but I couldn't help but feel even more frustrated. Here was yet more proof that Hoyo can tell a succinct and moving story with impeccable timing. They just don't put the effort into it 99% of the time. Cue even more talking about this, during which we're told that he hasn't slept for 500 years and has lived a life of never-ending torture. Kinda like Furina in some ways, except that none of this was shown on screen and none of it shows up in his characterized.
Yes! All of it is told, not shown. Oh, crap. That is the number one principle of filmmaking or anything cinematic in general. Show it! Show, don't tell. That's the thing. I would have liked this a lot more if they have been hinting at this a little bit more in a more obvious manner. If I'm gonna go back to my idealized story, okay? If Act 4, we fail, Natlan fail, Mavuika, Capitano are going at it again. They disagree on how to do this, and then we have some glimpse of Capitano having some kind of plan, some kind of thing like that, or just having more hints in general about Capitano's. It's gonna show up and do something about it. It would have been so good. Like even if we don't have the idealized version, if we don't lose in Act 4 and Act 5 still as is, I would appreciate a little bit more about Capitano before leading up to this. This doesn't really feel like a payoff moment. It doesn't feel deserved. Your flip-flop is outside the spine. Oh god. I did not like how Mavuika accepted her own death before Capitano arrived. The way Hu-Tao accepted her own death was a good example of how a character accepts their death. Like, so like, I'm here, let's just do this. I think it could be executed a little bit better. The part where Mavuika is here, if it is shown from before that she has already made up her mind, if it has been shown from before that she is willing to sacrifice herself for Natlan, if it's been made clearer, again, show don't tell, and even in this case it's not really told that well either. If in the fight there are moments of downfall and she says something along the line, or doesn't really have to say it, just like show that she's willing to sacrifice herself for the fight to be won, perhaps because she already knows that even if she can live through this fight, she's gonna die regardless, then we can see a little bit more better glimpse of this character. But because we don't really understand her character up until this point, and we don't see this as a logical step for this character to take, we feel it to be out of place. It's not even good as a shock value. And again, I think that entire sequence of the traveler celebrating with everyone is, even though it's kind of cute, I think it's distracting from the tension that has been building up until this point. It is distracting from Mavuika's character building. Or perhaps they could insert a little bit more of glimpse of Mavuika trying to avoid people during the celebration. Just give a little bit more screen time to, like, say, when the traveler is taking photo, we could see Mavuika trying to sneak away in the background, or perhaps we hear something about Mavuika saying to, I don't know, Chasca, saying to Zitlali, to whoever, Kinech, the Yansan, now that I have something to do. Go ahead and continue. It's almost like they are afraid that the player can guess Mavuika is gonna do something alone. Let the player guess. Let the player figure it out beforehand. A twist doesn't have to be entirely surprising. A twist can be something that people are guessing at already, and it's still dramatic. I think that biggest issue was outdoing Fontaine. Fontaine, even now, entirely of 4.0 was 100% more hard in like than 5.0 so far. I'm not sure what the reason is entirely. I just know that there are things that are better. Once again, the animation quality, the character pose, the fight choreography, that was nice. The story writing, it seems like they are trying to do too much, but then accomplish not that much. Even Chi-Chi was written better. What do you mean by that? And is Chi-Chi supposed to be written badly? What is this hate toward Chi-Chi? I mean, a character being not shown in the game can have a good story. What is this? Yeah. yeah. All right, let's continue. The video is about like 3 more minutes.
Point. After that, all that was left was some more speeches and then a street entertainer telling children the story we just played through just to make sure we didn't miss anything. I've seen a bunch of discussions online where anyone who disliked the final act was dismissed as someone who was critical of Natlan from the start, or a hater who was determined to dislike it without even giving it a chance. I'm sure some people fall into that. But personally, I enjoyed the early acts of Natlan Archon Quest, which may be part of why the final one just flopped so badly for me. I have serious problems with its pacing, feel that it dove headfirst into many of the traps I detailed in my recent video covering the flaws of Genshin storytelling, and feel that its plot has some serious issues. But even outside of those more technical complaints, I feel like this story was just not for me. They set up some interesting concepts early on: a compelling antagonist who shares the same goals as the protagonist but cannot agree to the same methods, a group of heroes from different tribes working together to save their nation from destruction, an overconfident leader who may be reckless in pursuit of her goals, but none of the parts which hooked me in came to fruition. Capitano was sidelined for the majority of the climax and then came in as a deus ex machina with an ultimately unsatisfying conclusion in the end, which threw away all of his vast potential for interesting stories in an eye. The heroes never felt like a cohesive unit, and few of them got any depth of characterization. There's little chemistry between them, aside from a few pairings like Molani and Kachina. There's no intertribal conflict or rivalry to spice things up, and in the end, their presence was reduced to some awkward platitudes spoken to build up the traveler's legend. Mavuika turned out to just have everything figured out. Every action she takes has the best possible outcome, she makes no mistakes, and she just has no need for growth or change. And don't get me started on how much I dislike the ethos which states that lack of fear equates to courage and encourages people to see death in battle as the ultimate goal in life. There's so much to unpack here which could have been explored in Natlan, and it's sad that they just treated this idea as unquestioned gospel. In the end, I'm glad that the finale did work for many people. If you're one of those people and you've made it this far, thank you for listening to my experience with it, even if you disagree. I hear that for many fans of shonen story tropes, it felt like a great example of the climax of one of their favorite story archetype. For me, it fell short even on that, plus I just can't get excited about a climax without the build-up. But if it works for some, then at least there's some positive to come out of it. Either way, the sharp turn in the storytelling in this final act has, unfortunately, left me feeling much unease about the future of Genshin's story. For me, Natlan fell well short of the very high bar set in Fontaine and Sumeru thanks to my dislike for the ending, and while it was still streets ahead of the other 3 nations, if Act 5 points towards a new direction in the narrative, then I'm afraid my enjoyment of it may end up failing completely. And that's nothing to say about my general feelings about some of the character designs that feel wildly out of place, as well as the seeming shift in target audience. But more of that in another video. Let's just hope they're cooking up something special for Snezhnaya. Until next time!
I think Hoyoverse is very capable of telling good story. Evident in the Sidler's quest, in the Mizuki's quest, in the Lantern Rite quest. I have not experienced this event quest yet, so I cannot really talk about it, whether it's a good example or not. They are capable, but they are just so inconsistent. That's my gripe of it. 1.0 are meant to be worse, right? Kind of. I like Venti's story quest. It's not grand, but it does show his characters and his troubles. Was there any other characters from the 1.0 story that I really like? Li Yue's story is okay-ish. Mondstadt's story is quite generic. How do I check the story quest for different characters? Here, right? Oh, actually here. What was the cool story among these? Jean's story fell flat. Venti is the first one I enjoy. Mona is eh. Zhongli is pretty cool. Zhongli is some god of salt thingy. Ganyu eh. Who tells stories eh. Yelan, I actually like the intrigue of it. Any particular character that I like the story of? Ito is nice. Cannot remember what Kazuha is. Oh, Kazuha is something about the sword. Eh. Mizuki I like. Deya I kinda like. Mavuika, yeah, we talked about that. What's happening? We're currently talking about Mavuika's story and how it leaves room to be desired. Mavuika's story, Natlan Archon Quest story, just in general. And it feels so disheartening to see well-written story immediately after the lackluster story from Li Yue and from Mizuki. This is really good. I love this location. Alright chat, that will be the end of the stream. Today we discuss about Mavuika's story, how it leaves us wanting more, left things to be desired. We gave the story our fair amount of criticism, and hopefully in the future Hoyoverse will give Mavuika a second story quest, or really concluding the Archon quest with the Gnosis and the Vachui trying to take it. We'll see whether they're gonna give Mavuika justice in terms of exploring her backstory and give her characters depth. With that in mind, I appreciate you as always, chat, for either just hanging out in the background or actively participating in the chat. I appreciate you all the same. If you like to support the stream, go ahead and like the stream. It really helps the algorithm. And if you like the stream enough that you want to further support it, you can also try super super chat or become a member of the stream, which become one of the Birbs. I really appreciate that, but only if you have the financial means too. With that, I hope you have an amazing rest of your day, and I hope that you're lucky with your gadget pooling, with your artifacts rolling. Here's some music to take us away. Last chance to like the stream before it's gone for good. This has been Team Birb. Bye bye.